Sirens don't always announce the arrival of disaster. Sometimes it wears a badge and a smug smile. At Gate B14 of O'Hare International, a seasoned federal agent watched 2 years of undercover work evaporate in the click of standard-issue steel handcuffs. She was seconds away from taking down a global syndicate mastermind. Instead, 2 local cops, fueled by a bogus tip and their own blind biases, tackled her to the carpet. This is the staggering true story of the arrest that brought the full weight of the federal government crashing down on a local precinct's front door. Fluorescent lights buzzed with a sickening hum above Terminal 5 of Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Agent Maya Reynolds adjusted the collar of her beige trench coat, letting her eyes sweep over the sea of exhausted travelers, restless children, and overpriced coffee cups. She looked like any other corporate consultant waiting to board Swissair Flight 118 to Zurich. She was, in reality, a senior operative for Homeland Security investigations, and the heavy, comforting weight of a Glock 19 pressed against her ribs in a concealed holster. For 24 agonizing months, Maya had lived, breathed, and bled Operation Iron Veil. Arthur Pendleton was 50 yards away. The man was a ghost in the world of illicit logistics, a billionaire shipping magnate who had secretly spent the last decade funneling military-grade drone technology to cartel warlords in Central America. Pendleton never touched the product. He never made the threats. He merely signed digital ledgers hidden behind layers of corporate shell companies. But tonight was different. Tonight, Pendleton was personally carrying a hard drive containing the decryption keys for a massive shipment sitting in a port in Genoa, Italy. If Pendleton got on that plane, he would vanish into a web of non-extradition treaties and Swiss bank anonymity. If Maya stopped him, she wouldn't just be arresting a man. She would be severing the central nervous system of a global arms network. Maya pressed a finger to the flesh-colored earpiece hidden beneath her dark, tightly coiled hair. Team Alpha, this is Reynolds. Target is approaching the primary checkpoint at Gate B14. I have visual. Waiting for him to scan his boarding pass before we box him in. Copy that, Reynolds, came the static-laced voice of Special Agent in Charge, David Harmon. Tactical teams are stacked at the jet bridge exit and the terminal corridors. Wait for the scan. We need him committed to the flight for the jurisdictional charges to stick. Do not jump the gun. I never jump the gun, David, Maya muttered under her breath, her eyes locked on Pendleton's tailored charcoal suit. He was smiling, chatting amiably with the gate agent, handing over his first-class ticket. Maya's pulse steadied. The adrenaline was a familiar friend. She began her slow, casual walk towards the gate, closing the distance to 30 yards. 20 yards. 10. Then the variables changed. Out of her peripheral vision, Maya clocked a sudden, aggressive shift in the crowd's movement. 2 uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department's airport division were shoving their way through the concourse. Officer Gary Russo, a heavily built man with a permanent scowl, and his partner, Officer Bradley Jenkins, were moving with the kind of reckless velocity usually reserved for active shooter situations. Their hands were resting dangerously close to their duty belts. Maya's tactical mind processed their trajectory in a fraction of a second. They weren't heading for Pendleton. They were heading straight for her. "Excuse me, folks. Step aside. Police, step aside," Russo barked, his voice echoing over the intercom announcements. Travelers parted like the Red Sea, murmuring in confusion. Maya froze. She didn't break cover, simply stepping slightly to the side to let them pass, assuming there was a medical emergency or a distressed passenger behind her. But Russo stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes locking onto Maya with a terrifying intensity. You in the tan coat! Stop right there! Do not move another inch! Rousseau bellowed, pointing a thick, accusatory finger directly at her chest. At the gate, Arthur Pendleton turned his head. His cold, calculating eyes met Maya's for a fleeting second. The billionaire paused, taking in the scene of the two aggressive police officers bearing down on the black woman in the trench coat. "Harmon," Maya whispered into her comms, keeping her lips barely parted. "I have local PD interfering. 2 uniforms. They're intercepting me. What the hell is going on?" "Reynolds, say again. Local PD is not read in on this operation. Tell them to stand down." "Hey, I said don't move and keep your hands where I can see them," Jenkins yelled, stepping out to flank her. His hand was now firmly on the grip of his holstered weapon. Maya kept her hands visible, palms facing outward, her posture entirely non-threatening. She was hyper-aware of the optics. A black woman in a busy airport being aggressively confronted by 2 white police officers. The crowd was already pulling out their smartphones. The last thing she could afford was a viral incident that would alert Pendleton's vast network. "Officers," Maya said, her voice remarkably calm, trained to de-escalate hostage situations and cartel standoffs. "There is a misunderstanding. I am carrying a badge in my left interior breast pocket. If you let me reach for it—" "Shut your mouth!" Rousseau snapped, closing the final few feet with shocking speed. "We received a credible tip. An armed black female, late 30s, tan coat, making threats and matching the description of a fugitive wanted for aggravated assault. Turn around and put your hands on your head. Now!" Maya's heart plummeted. A tip. It hit her with the force of a freight train. Pendleton hadn't just been walking to his gate blind. His counter-surveillance team had spotted her. They couldn't shoot her in an airport, but they could use the local police as a weapon. They had swatted her. They played on the profiling tendencies and aggressive tactics of the airport police to create a perfectly timed distraction. "Listen to me very carefully," Maya said, dropping the polite civilian act and lowering her voice so only they could hear. "I am a sworn federal agent with Homeland Security investigations. You are actively interrupting a classified federal operation. Call your watch commander right now. Look at my left pocket." "Yeah, and I'm the President of the United States," Rousseau sneered, his face flushing red with authority. "Turn around, or I will put you on this floor." Over Rousseau's shoulder, Maya saw the worst possible sight. Arthur Pendleton handed his ticket to the agent, offered a small, knowing smirk in Maya's direction, and walked down the jet bridge. Panic is a luxury federal agents cannot afford, but as Maya watched the boarding door begin to close behind Pendleton, a cold, sharp desperation clawed at her throat. She had tracked that man across through 3 continents. She had attended the funerals of 2 informants who had died, providing the intelligence she needed for this exact moment. And it was all being dismantled by a 911 dispatch error and the blinding arrogance of 2 beat cops. "Harmon!" Maya whispered urgently, tilting her head slightly toward her concealed mic. "Target is entering the jet bridge. Local PD is physical. Intervene now. Send the tactical team to the gate." Officer Jenkins caught the slight movement of her lips. "Who are you talking to? She's got a wire or an earpiece. Get her hands." Before Maya could brace herself, Rousseau lunged. He didn't ask for compliance. He demanded it with brute force. He grabbed her right wrist, twisting it violently behind her back. The sudden, intense pain shot up to her shoulder, forcing a sharp gasp from her lips. Jenkins moved in simultaneously, slamming his forearm against her upper back and shoving her forward. Maya's face collided with the edge of a plastic departure sign. The impact sent a shockwave through her jaw, but her mind remained surgically focused. She did not resist. Any struggle, any sudden movement, and these officers would use it as an excuse to draw their weapons. She had seen it happen too many times in the communities she grew up in. Even with a federal badge, a wrong move here could end with her bleeding out on the concourse floor. "Stop resisting!" Jenkins yelled, though Maya was standing completely still, yielding entirely to their force. "I am not resisting," Maya stated, her voice tight but remarkably steady, devoid of the panic they expected. "My credentials are inside my coat. My sidearm is licensed and registered to the Department of Homeland Security. You are making a catastrophic mistake. Check my pocket." Russo ignored her. He shoved her forcefully against the glass window overlooking the tarmac. Below them, the luggage handlers were throwing the last of the bags into the belly of Swissair Flight 118. The heavy metallic click of Smith & Wesson handcuffs echoed over the murmur of the horrified crowd. The cold steel locked tightly around her wrists, pinching the skin. "Got the cuffs on?" Russo breathed heavily, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He patted down her sides, his hands clumsy and rough. His palm brushed against the hard shape of her Glock 19. "Gun! She's got a gun! Concealed carry, right side!" "I told you I have a firearm," Maya said, pressing her cheek against the cool glass. She forced herself to breathe. In. Out. "I am Special Agent Maya Reynolds, SI badge number 884-Bravo. If you pull that weapon out of its holster in this crowded terminal, you will create a panic. Call your dispatcher. Run my name. Just look at the badge." "You don't give the orders here, lady," Jenkins said, his voice trembling slightly with the realization that he had just laid hands on an armed suspect. He reached under her coat, clumsily yanking the Glock from its holster. He held it up like a trophy. "Weapon secured." Dozens of cell phone cameras were recording. The flash of lenses reflected in the glass. The narrative was already being written in the minds of the onlookers. Another dangerous criminal apprehended at the airport. "Officers, please," Maya said, her tone dropping the commanding edge, pleading now not for herself, but for the mission. "The man who just walked down that jet bridge is Arthur Pendleton. He is an international arms trafficker. The only reason you got a tip about me is because his people called it in to distract you. You have to stop that plane." Russo let out a harsh, barking laugh, yanking her back away from the window by the chain of the handcuffs. "Arms trafficker? You watch too many movies." The tip said a black woman, matching a warrant out of Cook County, was pacing the terminal with a gun. You match the description. You have a gun. Story's over. "Did you even check the warrant?" Maya demanded, her professional composure finally cracking as she saw the jet bridge slowly retracting from the side of the massive Boeing 777. "Did you look at a photo, or did you just see a black woman in a trench coat and decide it was good enough for you?" "Watch your mouth," Russo snarled, his face inches from hers. "You're going to the holding cell downstairs, and then you're going to federal lockup for bringing a loaded firearm into an airport." "I am the federal government," Maya shouted, her voice finally echoing across the quieted terminal. But the roar of the jet engines drowned her out. Flight 118 was pushing back from the gate. Arthur Pendleton was gone. The encryption keys were gone. 2 years of undercover operations, millions of taxpayer dollars, and the lives of innocent people caught in the crossfire of cartel violence, all of it vanishing into the night sky. Maya closed her eyes, a single tear of pure, acidic frustration escaping and tracking down her cheek. "Let's move," Jenkins said, grabbing her by the bicep. They began to march her through the terminal, parading the handcuffed federal agent past hundreds of staring passengers. Maya walked with her head held high, ignoring the whispers and the pointing fingers. The operation was burned. The target had escaped. But as she was marched toward the airport precinct, a new, cold resolve settled into her bones. The people who had orchestrated this swatting were going to pay, and the officers who had blinded themselves to the truth out of sheer arrogance were about to experience a reckoning unlike anything the Chicago Police Department had ever seen. Harsh, flickering neon replaced the bright concourse lights as Russo and Jenkins dragged Maya into the subterranean holding area of the airport police precinct. The room smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and the nervous sweat of petty thieves and disorderly drunks. They pushed her roughly into a metal chair, bolted to the concrete floor inside an interrogation room. "Sit there and keep quiet," Russo ordered. He dumped her Glock 19 onto the metal table with a heavy clatter. "We're going to run your prints, find out who you really are, and then you're facing decades." Maya sat perfectly still. The handcuffs were biting into her wrists, but she didn't ask them to loosen the cuffs. She wanted every bruise, every mark, fully documented. "I've told you who I am," she said softly, staring dead ahead at the cinder block wall. "All you have to do is reach into my coat pocket. Why haven't you done that yet, Officer Russo?" Russo stopped near the door, glaring at her. "Because perpetrators lie. You don't get to dictate the search." "Gary," Jenkins muttered, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. The younger officer was starting to sweat. The adrenaline of the takedown was fading, replaced by a creeping, undeniable sense of doubt. The woman in the chair wasn't acting like a criminal. She wasn't manic. She wasn't begging. She was exhibiting the terrifying, ice-cold calm of an apex predator waiting for the cage door to open. "Just check the pocket. If it's a fake badge, we add impersonating an officer to the charges." Russo scoffed, but he walked over to Maya. He reached into the inner breast pocket of her trench coat. His thick fingers closed around a heavy, leather-bound credential case. He pulled it out. The room went entirely silent. Russo flipped the leather wallet open. The solid gold shield of the Department of Homeland Security caught the harsh overhead light. Above it, a laminated identification card displayed Maya's stern, professional photograph. Maya Reynolds, Supervisory Special Agent, Homeland Security Investigations. Clearance, Level 4, Top Secret. Russo stopped breathing. The color drained from his face so fast he looked as though he were about to faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the gold shield, then down at the black woman he had just violently assaulted and handcuffed. "That's," Jenkins whispered, leaning over Russo's shoulder. His eyes widened in absolute horror. "Oh my God. Oh my God. Gary, it's real. Look at the holographic seal. It's real." "It gets better," Maya said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "I suggest you check the serial number on that Glock you so unceremoniously yanked from my holster. You'll find it's registered directly to the Federal Armory in Quantico." Russo's hands began to shake. He dropped the credential wallet onto the metal table as if it were coated in acid. The tip," Dispatch said. "Dispatch got played," Maya stated, her eyes locked on Russo, pinning him to the spot. "And you let your eagerness to tackle a black woman in an airport override your training, your protocol, and your common sense. You didn't verify, you didn't assess, you just attacked." Before Russo could formulate an apology or a defense, the heavy steel door of the precinct holding area blew open with explosive force. "Where is she?" a voice roared down the hallway. It wasn't the voice of a police captain. It was the furious, thundering command of a man who possessed the authority to level the entire building. Footfalls pounded against the concrete. The door to the interrogation room was kicked open, nearly tearing it off its hinges. Special agent in charge, David Harmon, stood in the doorway. He was flanked by 4 HSI tactical operators in full tactical gear, carrying M4 carbines at the low ready. Behind them, the precinct's watch commander, Captain Miller, looked pale and absolutely terrified. Harmon's eyes swept the room. He saw the Glock on the table. He saw the gold shield next to it. And then he saw his top agent, handcuffed to a chair with a bruise forming on her jawline. Harmon's face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He walked slowly into the room, stepping right up to Russo. Russo instinctively took a step back, but he bumped into the table. "Uncuff her," Harmon whispered. The quietness of his voice was somehow more terrifying than his shout had been. "Sir, we got a 911 call about an armed," Jenkins stammered, pulling out his handcuff keys with violently shaking hands. "I said uncuff her!" Harmon roared, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Jenkins scrambled forward, his hands trembling so badly he dropped the key twice before finally inserting it into the locks. The cuffs clicked open. Maya slowly rubbed her raw wrists, standing up from the chair. She didn't look at the officers. She looked at Harmon. "Flight status?" she asked. Harmon's jaw tightened. "In the air. Outside U.S. airspace. Switzerland won't ground a commercial flight without an Interpol red notice, and by the time we cut through the red tape, Pendleton will be in a private car, heading for the Alps. We lost him, Maya." Maya closed her eyes. The weight of the failure pressed down on her chest, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The months of surveillance, the sleepless nights, the informants who had risked everything. Gone. All because of a fake phone call. She turned slowly, fixing her gaze on Russo and Jenkins. The two officers looked completely shattered, realizing the magnitude of the catastrophe they had just caused. "Captain Miller," Harmon said, not taking his eyes off the two officers. "Yes, Agent Harmon," the precinct captain squeaked. "You are going to strip these two of their badges and firearms right now," Harmon commanded, his voice dripping with venom. "Then you are going to put them in holding cells. My team is currently pulling the audio of the 911 call. We already tracked the ping. It came from a burner phone, dropped in a trash can in Terminal 5. A coordinated swatting designed to obstruct a federal investigation." "Agent Harmon, please," Russo begged, his arrogant bravado completely erased. "We were just doing our jobs. We followed the description." "You assaulted a federal officer," Maya said softly, stepping toward Russo. She stopped inches from his face. "You ignored my attempts to identify myself. You didn't follow protocol, you followed your prejudice, and in doing so, you just aided and abetted one of the most dangerous arms traffickers on the planet." Maya picked up her gold shield from the table, sliding it carefully back into her coat pocket. She then picked up her Glock, holstering it with a smooth, practiced motion. "Operation Iron Veil is dead," Maya said, looking at Harmon, but her eyes held a dangerous new fire. "But Pendleton made a mistake. He used local corruption and incompetence to get away, which means he left a trail here, in this city." Harmon nodded slowly, seeing the shift in his agent's demeanor. "What's the play, Reynolds?" Maya turned back to the trembling officers. "We lock down this precinct. We audit every arrest, every tip, every communication these officers have made in the last 6 months. Pendleton knew exactly which buttons to push to get these two to react. I want to know why." She paused, her voice turning to ice. "Pendleton won tonight, but I am going to tear this city apart until I find the people who made that phone call." By midnight, the O'Hare Airport Police Precinct had been transformed from a bustling local hub into a federal fortress. Black SUVs with government plates barricaded the exterior, their flashing strobes painting the concrete walls in urgent bursts of red and blue. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Dozens of heavily armed HSY agents had commandeered desks, seized hard drives, and ordered the entire night shift to remain seated while their communications were forensically duplicated. Maya Reynolds sat at the watch commander's desk, an ice pack pressed against her swollen jaw, her eyes locked onto a glowing monitor. She had shed the beige trench coat, revealing a dark, tactical turtleneck and her shoulder holster, the Glock 19 resting heavily against her side. Special Agent in Charge. David Harmon stood behind her, his arms crossed, watching lines of dispatch code scroll across the screen. "Captain Miller," Maya called out, not taking her eyes off the data. The precinct captain, looking 10 years older than he had 3 hours ago, shuffled forward. His uniform collar was unbuttoned, and he was sweating profusely under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Agent Reynolds, we are cooperating fully. You have our servers, our locker access, everything." "I don't need your cooperation, Captain. I need your explanation," Maya said coldly. She tapped a fingernail against the screen. "Your dispatch system, the computer-aided dispatch, or CAD. When a 911 call comes in regarding an armed suspect at an international airport, standard protocol dictates a terminal-wide broadcast to all available units, correct?" "Yes, of course," Miller stammered. "An active threat triggers an all-call. Tactical units, K9. Everyone responds to the gate." "Then why?" Maya asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Did the call regarding a black female matching a felony warrant at Gate B14 only go to one specific vehicle terminal?" Harmon leaned in, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "She's right. The CAD log shows the 911 call came into the main switchboard, but the dispatcher overrode the all-call function. They sent a direct encrypted text alert exclusively to the patrol car, assigned to Officers Russo and Jenkins." Maya spun the monitor around so Miller could see it. "Someone in your dispatch center intentionally bypassed the airport-wide response. They didn't want a coordinated professional tactical team assessing the situation. They wanted Gary Russo. They looked at your duty roster, identified the most aggressively profiled officers on shift, and aimed them directly at me like a loaded weapon." Miller stared at the screen, the color draining from his face. That requires overriding the priority matrix. Only a senior dispatcher could do that. "Who was manning the primary console at 2000 hours? Harmon demanded. Miller swallowed hard. "Gregory Trent. He's a civilian contractor. Been with the city for 5 years. "Get him," Maya ordered. 10 minutes later, Gregory Trent was sitting in the same metal chair Maya had occupied just hours before. He was a thin man in his late 20s, wearing a wrinkled polo shirt and wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his sweating nose. He was practically vibrating with terror as Maya walked into the interrogation room and locked the heavy steel door behind her. She didn't sit. She paced slowly around him, letting the silence stretch, letting his anxiety compound. "I didn't know you were federal," Trent blurted out, unable to take the pressure. "I swear to God, I thought it was just a tip. I was just doing my job." Maya stopped directly in front of him, slamming both hands down on the metal table with a deafening bang. Trent jumped, letting out a sharp yelp. "Do not lie to me, Gregory," Maya said, her voice laced with absolute venom. "We have the CAD logs. We have the keystroke records. You didn't just take a tip. You manually routed a bogus 911 call away from the airport tactical teams and sent it directly to Russo and Jenkins. You weaponized 2 aggressive cops to initiate a takedown at exactly 8:14 p.m. You bought Arthur Pendleton the 3 minutes he needed to board that plane. Trent's breathing grew ragged. I don't know who Arthur Pendleton is. But you know who paid you, Maya countered smoothly. This was a highly coordinated counter-surveillance strike. Someone approached you. Someone with a deep understanding of precinct dynamics. They offered you a staggering amount of money to simply route a message. How much, Gregory? I want a lawyer, Trent whimpered, staring at his shoes. A lawyer will tell you that you are currently facing charges of assaulting a federal officer, obstruction of justice, and aiding and abetting an international arms syndicate, Harmon said, stepping out from the shadows near the door. That is a minimum of 40 years in federal lockup. Your only way out of a concrete box is to give us the name of the middleman who bought you. Maya leaned in close, her eyes boring into Trent's. You have 60 seconds, Gregory. If I walk out that door, you are no longer a cooperating witness. You are a co-conspirator to terrorism. The clock starts now. She turned and began walking slowly towards the door. Each of her footsteps echoed like a hammer strike against the cinder block walls. "Wait!" Trent cried out, tears welling in his eyes. "Wait, please! It was a burner app! Signal!" Maya stopped, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She didn't turn around. "Keep talking." "I never met him in person," Trent babbled rapidly. "He reached out 3 weeks ago on a dark web forum I use. Said he needed a ghost in the system for a VIP transit. He paid me $50,000 in Monero. He gave me 3 specific instructions." Maya pulled out a notebook, signaling him to continue. "First, monitor the flight manifest for Swissair 118 and confirm boarding commenced on schedule. Second, wait for a specific phone number to dial 911 from within the terminal. Third, route the suspect description exclusively to the officers with the highest number of use-of-force complaints in the sector." Maya felt a cold chill run down her spine. The calculation was flawless. Pendleton's team hadn't just used the police. They had actively profiled the police force, identifying the most volatile officers to ensure maximum chaos. "What was the contact name on Signal?" Maya demanded. "He called himself the Architect," Trent sniffled. "But he made a mistake. When he sent the crypto, the wallet address had a transaction history linked to a high-end property leasing company in the loop. I ran a reverse lookup because I wanted to know who I was dealing with. The penthouse is leased to a man named Victor Crowley." Harmon stepped forward, tapping his earpiece. "Cyber Division. Run the name Victor Crowley. Cross-reference with commercial property leases in downtown Chicago." A pause. "Got him. We have an address." Maya finally turned back to Trent, her expression devoid of any sympathy. "Congratulations, Gregory. You just bought yourself a slightly nicer cell." The Chicago skyline was a jagged silhouette against the deep, bruised purple of the early morning sky. It was 3 a.m. While the rest of the city slept, 3 unmarked tactical vans tore through the deserted streets of the loop, running every red light with silent urgency. Inside the lead van, Maya checked the chamber of her Glock, the metallic clack lost in the rumble of the engine. Beside her, a 6-man HSY entry team sat in heavy ballistic armor, their faces obscured by balaclavas and night vision goggles. Victor Crowley wasn't just a middleman. He was the local logistics chief for Pendleton's entire North American operation. If Pendleton was the brain of the syndicate, Crowley was the hands. He arranged the bribes, hired the muscle, and managed the digital infrastructure that allowed millions of dollars of military hardware to vanish without a trace. "Target is a 2-story penthouse on the 42nd floor," Harmon's voice crackled over the tactical radio. "Building security is likely compromised. We bypass the lobby. Aerial insertion via the roof, while Team Bravo takes the service elevators. We box him in. Maya, you have point on the breach. We need him alive, and we need his servers intact." "Copy that," Maya replied, her adrenaline spiking, erasing the throbbing pain in her jaw and the raw chafe marks on her wrists. The van screeched to a halt in an alleyway adjacent to the glass and steel skyscraper. Maya and Team Bravo moved like shadows, bypassing the sleeping concierge and cutting the lock on the service elevator. As they ascended to the 41st floor, Maya closed her eyes, visualizing the floor plan cyber division had pulled from city records. Ding! The elevator doors slid open. The hallway was lined with dark wood paneling and soft, recessed lighting. It reeked of extreme, insulated wealth. Maya raised her weapon, moving smoothly down the corridor. 2 operators flanked her, carrying a heavy hydraulic door breacher. "Breach in 3, 2, 1, Maya whispered into her mic. The hydraulic ram slammed into the reinforced oak door of Penthouse 4, 201. The frame splintered with a deafening crack, and the door flew inward. "Federal agents, get on the ground!" Maya roared, sweeping into the expansive ultra-modern living room. The penthouse was a chaotic juxtaposition of luxury and frantic destruction. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, but the interior was filled with acrid smoke. In the center of the room, surrounded by plush white leather sofas, Victor Crowley was desperately tossing external hard drives into an industrial thermite shredder. Crowley was a sharp-featured man in a silk robe, his eyes wide with panic as the HSI team swarmed the room. Seeing Maya's weapon leveled at his chest, he didn't freeze. Instead, he lunged toward a heavy, custom-built computer rig resting on a glass desk, his hand reaching for a large red kill switch that would wipe the internal servers. "Don't do it, Victor!" Maya yelled, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Crowley's fingers brushed the switch. Maya didn't hesitate. She launched herself over the glass desk, her body colliding heavily with Crowley's, just as he pushed the button. They crashed to the hardwood floor in a tangle of limbs. Crowley, fueled by desperation, threw a wild elbow that caught Maya squarely on her already bruised jaw. White-hot pain exploded behind her eyes, but she refused to let go. She leveraged her momentum, pinning Crowley's arm behind his back, a stark, ironic mirror of what Officer Russo had done to her hours earlier. But Maya used precision, not brute force. She drove her knee into the small of his back, snapping a pair of flex cuffs around his wrists in one fluid motion. "Secure!" Maya gasped, rolling off him and pulling herself up using the edge of the desk. "Servers are wiping, Reynolds," an HSI cyber tech yelled, frantically typing on Crowley's keyboard. He hit the kill switch. The primary drives are erasing at military-grade speed. We're losing the decryption keys for the Genoa shipment. Crowley let out a harsh, bloody laugh from the floor. "You're too late, Agent. The keys are gone. Pendleton is halfway to Zurich, and the Genoa Port Authority is going to release the drones in exactly 12 hours. You breached my door for nothing." Maya stared at the rapidly formatting progress bar on the screen. The operation was slipping through her fingers again. But then, she looked down at Crowley. He was smiling, but his eyes were darting nervously toward a massive, abstract metal sculpture resting on a pedestal in the corner of the room. It was a subtle tell, but after 2 years of undercover work, Maya was an expert at reading the micro-expressions of liars. "You're a paranoid man, Victor," Maya said slowly, walking toward the sculpture. Pendleton trusts you to destroy the evidence, but a man who brokers illegal arms deals never destroys his only leverage. Crowley's smile vanished. Don't touch that. Maya examined the sculpture. It was a heavy block of welded steel. She ran her hands along the base, feeling a slight, barely perceptible seam. She pressed her thumb hard against the corner. A hidden biometric lock clicked, and a small drawer slid open from the base of the pedestal. Inside the drawer lay a single, heavily encrypted titanium flash drive. Maya held it up by the lanyard, the small metal drive catching the dawn light filtering through the windows. The primary servers were a decoy. You kept a master backup, the actual decryption keys, and I'm guessing the backdoor access to Pendleton's offshore accounts. Crowley thrashed against the flex cuffs, his face turning purple with rage. You can't crack that! It's encrypted! I don't need to crack it, Maya said, a cold, triumphant smile finally touching her lips. I just need to use it to lock Pendleton out of his own shipment. She turned to Harmon, who had just stepped through the shattered doorway. David, get the Director of European Operations on the line. I want a joint task force waiting at the port in Genoa. Pendleton is going to land in Zurich, open his laptop, and find out he doesn't own a single bullet anymore. Harmon grinned, staring at the titanium drive. Good work, Reynolds. We just cut the head off the snake. Maya looked down at the bruised, battered fixer on the floor, and then out the window at the waking city. She had survived the trap. She had unraveled the swatting. But the real satisfaction wasn't just seizing the drive. It was knowing that Arthur Pendleton, thousands of miles away, in a first-class cabin, had absolutely no idea that his Emma had just burned to the ground. High above the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps, Arthur Pendleton swirled a glass of vintage Dom Perignon, blissfully unaware that a digital guillotine was already descending upon his empire. He reclined in the plush leather seat of Swissair Flight 118's first-class cabin, savoring the quiet hum of the Boeing 777's engines. In his mind, he had already won. The clumsy, desperate display by the Chicago police had been a masterclass in exploiting systemic bias. He had watched that black female agent get slammed against the glass, her authority completely nullified by a single, calculated phone call. It was almost too easy. People, Pendleton always mused, were painfully predictable. 9 hours later, the aircraft touched down gracefully on the tarmac of Zurich Airport. Pendleton bypassed the chaotic public customs queues, escorted by a private concierge directly to the exclusive Credit Suisse VIP transit lounge. He surrendered his tailored cashmere coat to an attendant, ordered a double espresso, and settled into an isolated, soundproof workstation overlooking the runway. It was time to close the deal. Thousands of miles away in Chicago, the HSY command center was a hive of controlled chaos. Empty coffee cups littered the desks, and the air conditioning struggled against the heat generated by banks of high-powered servers. Maya Reynolds stood shoulder to shoulder with the Cyber Division's lead technician, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, her jaw throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache. But she was running on pure, unadulterated adrenaline. Victor Crowley's titanium flash drive was plugged into an isolated, air-gapped terminal. It had taken the cyber team 2 hours to bypass the secondary biometric locks, but what they found inside was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the room. Crowley had not just backed up the decryption keys for the Genoa arms shipment. He had quietly installed a financial backdoor into Pendleton's entire offshore network. The fixer had been skimming millions off the top for years, hiding the stolen funds behind a labyrinth of dummy corporations. "Pendleton just logged on to the Zurich airport secure Wi-Fi," the lead technician announced, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. "He's routing through a VPN, but we have his MAC address. He is attempting to access the Genoa Port Authority's secure ledger. He's trying to authorize the release of the cargo containers." "Block him," Harmon ordered from across the room. "No," Maya intervened, placing a firm hand on the technician's shoulder. "If you block him, he knows we're in the system. He'll immediately dump his physical hard drives and run. We don't just want to stop the shipment. We want to trap him inside his own hubris." Harmon frowned. "What are you suggesting, Reynolds?" Maya leaned closer to the monitor. "Crowley's drive gives us administrative access to Pendleton's primary accounts at Credit Suisse and UBS. I want you to initiate a total asset freeze, but make it look like an internal bank audit. At the same time, we transmit the Genoa decryption keys directly to the Italian Polizia di Stato. Let Pendleton initiate the transfer. Let him think he's opening the door, only to find the Italian authorities waiting on the other side." The technician grinned, understanding the sheer psychological devastation of the plan. "Executing now, routing the decryption keys to Interpol Command in Rome. I am simultaneously triggering a cascade lockout on all associated routing numbers in Zurich." Back in the hushed elegance of the VIP lounge, Pendleton typed his complex 32-character alphanumeric password into his encrypted laptop. A progress bar appeared on the screen. "Authenticating Genoa transfer." He took a slow, satisfied sip of his espresso. The cargo, 400 modified military-grade autonomous drones destined for a brutal cartel in Sinaloa, was about to vanish into the global black market, padding his accounts with another $80 million. The progress bar hit 99%. It hung there for a fraction of a second. Then the screen flashed a brilliant, violent red. "Error. Encryption key compromised. Cargo seized by directive of Interpol." Pendleton choked on his coffee, coughing violently as he stared at the screen. "What?" he hissed, his hands trembling as he frantically hit the escape key. No! Crowley, you idiot! What did you do?" He quickly opened a secondary window, executing an emergency protocol designed to wipe his servers and wire his liquid assets into an untraceable cryptocurrency wallet. He punched in his master banking PIN. Access denied. Accounts frozen pending federal investigation. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced Pendleton's armor of arrogance. He slammed the laptop shut, shoving it into his leather briefcase. He didn't have time to understand how it had happened. He only knew he had to get out of the airport. He stood up, throwing a 100-franc note on the table, and moved rapidly toward the lounge exit. He pushed through the frosted glass doors, stepping out into the main transit corridor. "Arthur Pendleton!" A stern, heavily accented voice rang out. Pendleton froze. Standing in a tight semicircle blocking his path were 6 heavily armed officers of the Swiss Federal Police, accompanied by 2 detectives in plain clothes wearing Interpol identification badges. "Is there a problem, officers?" Pendleton asked, forcing a calm, authoritative tone, desperately trying to project the aura of an untouchable billionaire. "I am late for a very important board meeting. The only meeting you will be attending today is at the Palace of Justice," the lead detective said, stepping forward. He produced a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "You are being detained under an international red notice for arms trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Pendleton's breath hitched. He looked at the surrounding officers, their hands resting on their sidearms. There was no local precinct to manipulate here. There were no corrupt dispatchers to bribe. The full crushing weight of international law enforcement had finally caught up to him. In the Chicago Command Center, the live feed from the Swiss authorities flickered onto the main projector screen. Maya watched in absolute silence as the billionaire was shoved roughly against the marble wall of the terminal, his arms twisted behind his back, the silver cuffs locking around his wrists with a definitive, final click. The room erupted into cheers. Agents were clapping, hugging, and exhausted cybertechs leaned back in their chairs, running hands over their tired faces. Maya didn't cheer. She simply let out a long, shuddering breath, the tension of the last 2 years finally bleeding out of her muscles. She touched the bruised skin on her jawline. "We got him," Harmon said, walking over and handing Maya a fresh cup of coffee. Genoa port authorities just confirmed seizure of all 400 drones. Crowley is singing like a canary and holding, giving up every cartel contact on his ledger. It's a total operational victory. Maya took the coffee, her eyes still locked on the image of Pendleton being marched away in handcuffs. "It's a victory, David. But there is still one piece of trash left to take out." 72 hours after the catastrophic breach at Gate B14, the atmosphere inside the O'Hare Airport police precinct was unrecognizable. The usual bravado and casual banter of the patrol officers had been replaced by a suffocating, paranoid silence. Agents from the FBI's Civil Rights Division were walking out the front doors carrying boxes of internal affairs files, use-of-force reports, and communication logs. The entire precinct was being ripped apart down to the studs. Gary Russo sat in a small, windowless interrogation room. He was no longer wearing his dark blue uniform. Instead, he wore the bright, humiliating orange of a Cook County Jail inmate. His badge had been stripped. His pension was frozen. His union representative had taken one look at the federal indictment and advised him to plead guilty to everything. The heavy steel door opened, and Maya Reynolds walked in. She wore a sharp, tailored navy suit, her HSI gold shield clipped prominently to her belt next to her holstered Glock. The bruise on her jaw had faded to a dull yellow, but her eyes possessed an unyielding, terrifying clarity. She pulled out the metal chair opposite Russo and sat down, folding her hands neatly on the table. Russo couldn't look at her. He stared at his manacled hands resting on his lap. The man who had been so eager to assert his dominance in the airport terminal now looked small, hollowed out, and entirely broken. "Your partner, Bradley Jenkins, signed a proffer agreement this morning," Maya said, her voice calm and conversational, lacking the venom Russo expected. It somehow made it worse. "He admitted that neither of you verified the warrant. He admitted that you ignored protocol. He also provided the federal grand jury with a detailed history of your specific habit of targeting minorities in the terminal to pad your arrest quotas." Russo swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. "He's lying to save his own skin. We got a tip. We were acting in good faith." "Good faith," Maya repeated, testing the words as if they left a foul taste in her mouth. "You threw a federal agent against a glass wall because it was easy, because the dispatch description matched a bias you already held so deeply in your heart that it blinded you to the reality standing right in front of you." She leaned forward, forcing Russo to finally look up and meet her gaze. "You didn't just assault me, Gary. You became a tool for a cartel arms dealer. Victor Crowley and Gregory Trent knew you were racist, and they weaponized it. They bet millions of dollars that you would act exactly the way you did. They bet that you would see a black woman in a trench coat and immediately resort to violence without asking a single question. "I was a cop for 15 years, Russo whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of shame and lingering defensive. I protected this city. You protected your own ego, Maya corrected sharply. And now, because of your actions, the FBI is auditing every single arrest you've made in the last decade, every person you've railroaded, every report you've falsified. You are going to federal prison, Gary. Not just for obstructing a federal operation, but for violating the civil rights of God knows how many innocent people who didn't have a gold shield in their pocket to save them. Maya stood up, pushing the chair in. She looked down at him one last time. There was no satisfaction in her chest, only a grim, necessary resolution. Arthur Pendleton thought he could use the corruption of a local precinct to escape justice, Maya said softly. But all he did was shine a massive federal spotlight on the rot inside this department. You thought you were the predator at gate B14, but you were just the bait. She turned and walked out of the room, the heavy steel door slamming shut behind her, sealing Russo in the silent tomb of his own making. Outside the precinct, the morning air was crisp and biting. Harmon was leaning against the hood of a black government SUV, typing on his secure encrypted phone. He looked up as Maya approached, offering a rare, genuine smile. Just got the official word from the Department of Justice, Harmon said, putting the phone away. Pendleton's extradition treaty was fast-tracked. He'll be in a Supermax facility in Colorado before the end of the month. The Genoa Port Authority seized the drones, and the Sinaloa buyers are currently being rounded up by the Mexican Marines. It's over, Maya. You did it. Maya took a deep breath of the freezing Chicago air. She thought about the 2 years she had spent chasing ghosts. She thought about the informants who hadn't lived to see this day. And she thought about the chilling reality that all her training, all her federal authority, had almost been undone by the simple, mundane evil of a prejudiced beat cop. It's never really over, David, Maya said, opening the passenger door of the SUV. There will always be another Pendleton. There will always be another Crowley. And unfortunately, there will always be another Russo. Maybe, Harmon conceded, getting into the driver's seat and starting the engine. But today, the good guys won. The system worked, even if we had to tear a piece of it down to fix it. Maya looked out the window as the SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the disgraced precinct behind. She reached down, her fingers brushing the cool, heavy leather of her credential case. The gold shield inside wasn't just a symbol of authority. It was a profound, terrifying responsibility. It was a weapon against the syndicates that operated in the shadows, and a shield against the rot that sometimes festered in the light. She let out a long, quiet sigh, the adrenaline finally leaving her system, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She had survived the trap. She had broken the syndicate. But as the Chicago skyline passed by her window, Maya Reynolds knew that she would never walk through an airport terminal the exact same way ever again. Thank you for diving into this intense, real-life, inspired thriller. The intersection of systemic issues and high-stakes espionage shows that danger isn't just in the shadows. Sometimes it's wearing a uniform right in front of us. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button, share this video with fellow true crime and thriller fans, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping, jaw-dropping narratives. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and drop a comment below letting us know which twist shocked you the most.